Hello, this is a small explanation of the first task. Today I will publish the second task with the explanation, and I also will move the time frame for the first task a little bit. Remember to ask questions on our channel. If you will have any questions regarding the subject, ask it please on our Teams channel. Okay. Okay, so first of all, in this task you have to learn a little bit about Git. I'm pretty sure that most of you, if not all, already works with Git. If you have any problem with Git, then I will post maybe 1 or 2 links to the explanation of how to work with Git. Now, in the first task, we want to familiarize ourselves with how the Visual Studio works. So, in the task, we have to create a simple console app that will fetch the data from a website, HTML data, then look through the data and extract certain type of information from it. So, to help you with it and to discuss a little bit certain things, I created the console app within Visual Studio and started this task a little bit. So, in our task, what we want to have a simple console app that allows us to pass the parameter. And this parameter is the URL of the website, which content we want to download. Usually we use the args parameter, the args array, to pass data to the main method, to our program to do something with it. So that's what we are using. So I assume that here the first parameter will be the URL. If the length is 0, if we don't get any parameters, I assume that we can throw an exception. I choose here one of the built-in exception argument, null exception, and we are saying that you have to pass the URL as the first parameter. Yeah. Now, then we have to check is the URL correct. This is the second thing that we have to do. Well, how to do it? So we have to check whether this is the full correct URL and not just any kind of string of data. We can do it in a number of ways. In here I'm using the static method from the URI class that is called tryCreate. The first parameter is the string which I want to parse into the URI object. Then the information, what kind of URI, this is the absolute URL. And then we have the out parameter. The out parameter means that later on, if I want to work with this parsed URL, I can work with the variable called URI result. This is this parameter. Yeah. Notice one thing, this is parameter that is an out parameter. This means that our tryCreate method is an example of the pattern in which the method itself returns Boolean value, telling us whether we managed to parse the URL into the correct object, false or true. And if it worked correctly, then in this variable, in this out parameter, out argument, we can later on read and check the value itself, the URI parse into the URI object, into the URI object. So we have an example of the method that is giving us the result in 2 forms, as a return type and as an out parameter, which is pretty convenient, so that we don't have to throw an exception from this method if the parsing does not work. We are just returning the Boolean value. We can kind of do it this way. Then, immediately after this return the true or false, telling us whether it works or not, I'm using the AND symbol and checking if the URI result scheme, whether this is the HTTPS or HTTP. So I'm also making sure that the identifier that I got, it has the proper scheme set up, which is the HTTP or HTTPS. Yeah. Now, of course, if the result is not true, then basically it means that we have to throw an exception telling us that basically URL is not a correct one. So it simply means that we have to fix it somehow. Yeah? And here the application ends. If everything is okay, the application will just print the URL to the console. So let's just run it and see the result. As you see, I see the URL in here. Now, The question is how we can pass the URL to this argument section. Now, to be honest, when we run the application in Visual Studio, a good thing is to, from time to time, click the build solution to make sure that your application built successfully. Second thing, you can right-click on the project, and in the Properties tab, you can set up the, in the debug section, you can set up the application arguments. And here you can set up the URL that you want to pass as an argument to the app. So this is one way of doing this. Let's take a look. If I won't pass anything in here, I will get an exception saying you have to pass the URL. If I will pass the URL, but the URL will not be correct, like let's say something like this, then I will get the URL is not a correct one. Yeah, so that's how we can do it. Secondly, in the third task, you are asked to try to run your app from the console. Well, take a look. If I will right-click my project and go to the Open Folder in File Explorer option, you can see the content of my project. If you will go inside the bin folder, debug, netcore app 3.1, you can see the compilation results. And within this folder, you can turn on and run the PowerShell. Now, this is just an exe file. This is what is being generated every time we compile our app. So let's just run task 1 from the current location. And let's take a look. It ran. You have to pass the URL as the first parameter. Okay, so let's just pass any kind of value as the first parameter. This is how we do it, basically. And we see the URL is not correct one. Now, let's pass... oh, sorry, not this, but let's pass a correct URL. And you see the application just prints the URL back, which means that there were no exceptions. The URL is correct. He just ran to this line of code and exited. So we have two things checked. If we have any value passed, if the URL is correct. Now, the next thing is we want to fetch the content of the website and check whether it contains something. So what I can do, I can create the object which is called HTTP client class, and this class allows me, this is built-in class that allows me to make the HTTP requests. You see, sometimes I'm using the var, which is actually convenient because you don't have to write the full name HTTP client. So you can also do it like this. This is the same thing. This is still a static type. Or Control S. In my case, I have auto formatting turned on, so I'm switching it to the full name here. Now, how to make a request? To make a request, I will use HTTP client, get async, and I will actually use my URI result. And that's it. Now, what we have in here, the get async method will send the get HTTP request and actually will return me something that is similar to promise, or in here called task, which is something that will finish in the future. So when I will run the app now, I will send the request, app will finish, and I don't wait for the result. So because of that, I want to await the result. Now, we won't be talking about asynchronous programming unless someone would like to learn a little bit about it. It won't be that necessary in our case, but await the async is the same pattern that some of you know from other languages, like promises and in JavaScript and so on. So because I'm awaiting the result, I'm waiting in here and I got the HTTP response back. And now, because I waited for the result, I can do something with this result. So what I can do with it? Well, I can check if the response and the HTTP response message class is actually a success status code. So it means that, for example, success status code is usually from the HTTP protocol perspective 200 something something, yeah? Otherwise, I can just print to the console information that there was an error, or that there was an error during downloading of the website. So error during get request. And here I can finally take a look and see the content of the response. So I can say content, read a string async, and that's it. So read content is the content of the HTTP response, and read a string allow me to read this response as a string value, and just, for example, I can just print it to the console to see the result. Yeah. So let's see if I actually get the result of the website printed to the console, just like as the browser would do. Yeah. And I got the HTML soup in here with a lot of different tags. Yeah. So I got this part finished. Now I need to check whether this content, this content of the website contains certain thing, whether it contains email addresses. And for that purpose, probably the best thing is to use some kind of regex. Now we have a regex class that allow me to specify the regular expression value that I'm looking for. Now, if you know, looking for an email address is not actually that simple. Just to show you, there is a separate, actually RFC document just for specifying the proper email regex that it actually is not working fully anyway, so it's not that easy. Of course, normally we are not using that often, that kind of complex regex. Usually something simpler is sufficient, but just to show you that we have things like that. So I will make something that won't be a super correct regex, but I will just, let's say, assume that there is a space, then there is A and Z, more than one character, then there is this character, and then let's say then there is again A and Z and dots, and that's it, and it's more than one, something like that. Of course, it's not fully correct, so you can think of quite easily about an email that maybe will slip through this regex. So your task is to create a little bit more sensible regex. And let's how to use this regex. Well, regex class has a matches method that allow me to pass the string value that I'm looking through, and I can actually just iterate over the result. So let's take a look. I can just print all the result to the console. This is the for each loop. I'm going through every element in the matches collection and just printing toString to the console. So let's take a look what will be printed. I have one email saying pjatk and so on, and actually I think this is the only email on this website. So your case, you have to make sure that we print emails in a unique way. So that's one thing that you have to make sure. For example, you can use specific type of collection for that. Maybe if you remember collection like a sets from Java, then you know that set contain only unique values. So you can use a set to get only unique values. And actually you can make a bunch of other ways to do it. So this is not fully correct. It's almost, let's say, finished. And your task is just to finish it a little bit more, and also this way kind of see how Visual Studio works and so on. So I hope that this task will be clear now. If you will have any more questions, then remember to write on MS Teams if you will have any questions, okay? Now, some of the people from the Polish group asked for some material about design patterns. Well, I will probably create such a material as an additional thing. If someone would be interested in this as an optional thing, it's not compulsory, then let me know on Teams channel, okay? Okay, and that's it. And if there are any questions, please write on MS Teams. Today I will also publish the second lecture, and we will talk about the solid principles and API projects.